Over in a slave trading company known as Palom, a beast girl named Reva is meeting with a client. But while the client is indeed impressed with her aptitude for magic, he asks Reva if she knows how to use any practical magic spells. Reva says she doesn't know any useful spells yet, but Reva will try her hardest to learn so she can be useful to him. However, the man tells her he can't purchase her, because he needs someone who can help him now, and he doesn't have time to wait for Reva to train. But he acknowledges that she is unique, so he wishes her the best of luck in finding a master. Once the client leaves, Reva apologizes to Palom for getting rejected again, but he tells her she doesn't need to worry herself because sooner or later the right master for her will turn up. Reva tries to remain hopeful, but it's been several years since Reva got here and she still hasn't found anyone to be her master. Reva thinks back to her old life with her younger brother and how she was forced to sell herself off as a slave to make money and take care of her family. But despite all that, Reva hasn't managed to make a single money yet. Over in Takumi's house, Takumi is still working as hard as he can to finish his carriage, and it's starting to worry Maria. Maria asks Takumi if he plans to return to Gambo's workshop today, and Takumi confirms it since there's a lot of blacksmithing work that needs to be done before the trip. Sophia tells Takumi he might be overworking himself a little because on top of all the effort Takumi has put in to finish the carriage, he still has to make more potions and refrigerators for Paypek. Not to mention that Takumi hasn't taken a single break in the last few days, so at this rate she is worried he might work himself to death. Takumi appreciates that both of them are so concerned about his well-being, but Takumi assures them that he is fine, so Takumi heads out as planned. Takumi's first stop for the day is the guild, but as he enters, Takumi hears a man desperately trying to get the guild master to believe him because he saw something horrific. Takumi walks up to the front desk and asks Hans what all the commotion is about, so Hans explains that there have been several reports of people seeing a strange creature outside. Takumi asks what kind of creature it is, but no one knows what it looks like, although Hans has drawn a sketch based on what the witnesses told him. Even with the sketch, it is still unclear what the creature is, but Hans isn't too worried about it since there haven't been any damage reports yet. Hans asks Takumi what brings him to the guild today, so Takumi explains that he wants to register a new pet he just got. Hans is impressed that Takumi managed to tame another pet, and considering the stuff Takumi has done so far, he was already expecting it to be somewhat strange. Still, Hans is absolutely horrified when Takumi pulls Camellia out of his pocket dimension. Then Hans looks at his sketch and realizes that Camellia is the monster that everyone has been so scared of. Now they know Takumi was the cause of all the panic. The guild master pulls him into a meeting to scold him until Takumi begs for mercy. Meanwhile, Sophia is out in town because she just returned from the meeting with Mulan. Sophia was there to ask if Mulan had any slaves with magical abilities who could help Takumi with his work, but unfortunately, she didn't have anyone who fit that description. Mulan instead suggested that Sophia try looking at other slave trading companies to see if they have any slaves that fit the requirements she is looking for. As Sophia walks back home, she meets up with Maria, who is shopping for ingredients to make lunch. Maria noticed how exhausted Takumi has been lately, so she wants to make him feel better with her cooking. But when Maria and Sophia head to Gambo's workshop to check on Takumi, they find him knocked out in a wood pile. They are initially shocked, but Gambo tells them there's nothing to worry about since Takumi fell asleep while working. It's not hard to imagine why when Takumi has been working so hard without resting. Despite Takumi's exhaustion, he kept working hard with a smile until Takumi passed out. Takumi will be fine for now, but Gambo warns the girls that he might die one day if they don't get Takumi to stop working so hard. A little while later, once Takumi wakes up from his nap, he finishes the carriage and Takumi looks so proud of himself for it. Takumi has every right to be proud too because he broke the laws of physics to make this thing. It looks like a regular carriage on the outside, but on the inside it's the size of a house. Takumi put a lot of work into enchanting this carriage with spatial magic to make the inside bigger, and he even outfitted it with all the daily necessities, so the longest road trips would be comfortable. Everyone gets in so they can take it out for a test ride, and Maria is having the time of her life driving it. Even though the carriage is moving at terrifying speeds, you can hardly feel any vibrations from the inside, so there is no risk of motion sickness. They've still got time before their scheduled trip, so Takumi tells Maria that she can make suggestions on anything Maria wants him to add to the carriage, and since he offered, she asks him for spikes. Spikes on the side have no useful functionality, but it'd be cool. Takumi acknowledges Maria's suggestion and promptly ignores it, so they carry on as usual, and a few days later, it is time for their trip. They pull up to the city gate and meet Lions Fong there since they'll escort them to the capital. Paypek and the others soon arrive, and since everyone is here, Takumi thinks it's time for them to get going. However, before they leave, Paypek is a little curious about what carriage built by Takumi would look like, so he asks if he can take a look inside. Takumi tells him to go ahead, so Papek steps inside, and the second he sees the house inside and freaks out. Papek frantically asks Takumi to tell him how he made such a marvelous carriage and offers to pay him handsomely for the information. Still, Lord Godwin knocks some sense into him, because he doesn't want Papek to make Takumi uncomfortable. Then Godwin exclaims loudly how he would love to have a carriage as wonderful as Takumi's. While Godwin is not ordering Takumi to make one for him, if Takumi were to give him one as a gift, he would be so thankful that Godwin would be willing to pay 100 platinum coins. Takumi does some quick math and realizes that 100 platinum is roughly 1 billion yen. For now, the group sets out on their journey with Takumi and his party in his carriage, while Godwin and Papek use their respective carriages. As they ride, Godwin talks to his assistant about how much of an asset Takumi has become for the kingdom ever since he showed up. Godwin is sure Takumi will eventually reach even greater heights, but all his accomplishments are bound to draw unwanted attention. While the king and Godwin will do everything they can to shield Takumi from threats within the kingdom of Barkula, the Empire of Sidonia will still be very difficult to deal with. Speaking of the Empire of Sidonia, we look into the future after the other heroes are summoned. Akane is reading an old Sidonian history book to gather as much information as possible. The book talks about the goddess Anat whom Sidonia worships, and it says she created humanity in her likeness. Then she created beastmen from beasts and elves from spirits, all to serve mankind. That is why beastmen in the Empire of Sidonia are treated so poorly, and Akane can't stand it. Back to Takumi's time, he and the others have just arrived at the capital, and Takumi is happy they managed to make it safely without being attacked. But the only reason was that Takumi's party kept wiping out all the monsters that got even slightly close to them. Lion's Fawn literally did nothing the entire time, even though they are meant to be the bodyguards here. Just then Papek approaches Takumi and says he has something to talk to him about, so once they reach the inn, Papek tells Takumi that he wants to gift the king a carriage similar to the one Takumi made for himself. Papek already talked this over with Lord Godwin, and he thinks this would be the perfect way to demonstrate Takumi's expertise to the king. Although their audience with the king is only 5 days away, Papek doesn't think Takumi will be able to make one in time, so he suggests they wait until the next time they have an audience with the king. However, Takumi surprisingly says he can do it within 5 days. If Takumi made it after getting home, he would have to transport the carriage back to the capital. That is way too much work, so Takumi thinks it would be better to make it while he's already here. Finding the necessary materials in the capital shouldn't be too hard. However, the main problem is that Takumi needs somewhere to begin building and doesn't have a workshop in the capital. Thankfully, Papek says he knows the perfect place for Takumi to do all his work, at the Palm Company. Takumi later meets with Maria and Sophia to tell them about Papek's proposition for him to work at the Palm Company. Sophia happens to know a bit about the Palm Company, so she tells Takumi it's one of the more trustworthy slave trading companies in the capital, at least according to what Molan told her. Papek got permission for Takumi to use one of the Palm Company's old buildings, so as soon as the materials arrive, Takumi intends to begin working on the new carriage. However, Sophia refuses to let that happen. Sophia tells Takumi that he needs to get himself an assistant. Takumi nearly worked himself to death building the first carriage. Now Takumi wants to start working on a second one without stopping to take a break. Even a workaholic like him has to realize that he is being reckless with his health, so Sophia asks him to get himself another slave while they are at the Palm Company. Takumi understands that Sophia and Maria are genuinely worried for his well-being, so he agrees to get a new slave, and the next day Takumi meets with the owner of the Palm Company. Takumi tells him that he is looking for a slave to help him with his alchemy, and since Takumi is currently working on a carriage that has various magical elements, Palom assumes Takumi would need a slave who has magical aptitude. While Takumi is having his meeting, Sophia is standing outside, but all of a sudden, Maria comes running up to her in a panic because she can't find Maple anywhere. Maple said something about wanting to explore the Palom building earlier, and if anyone sees a killer spider roaming the halls, they're going to freak out. So Sophia says she is going to look for Maple before she causes any trouble. Unfortunately, by the time Sophia finds Maple, she has already scared out Reva, who was just trying to enjoy her book. Maple apologizes for scaring Reva, and Sophia helps her back to her feet, but as she does so, Sophia notices that Reva is carrying a book about alchemy. Sophia asks Reva if she is interested in alchemy, and Reva tells her how much she loves studying alchemy. A few minutes later, Reva is brought into the meeting room to meet with Takumi, since Palom suggested her as a good candidate for Takumi's needs. Reiva greets Takumi and takes a seat so they can begin their discussion, but as Takumi is telling her about the tasks he needs completed, Reiva is completely zoned out because she is worried she will get rejected again and won't get to make any money for her family. Just then, Takumi mentions something about needing someone who is somewhat knowledgeable in alchemy, and as soon as Reiva hears the word alchemy, she jumps up because alchemy is her thing. Reiva loves alchemy just as much as Takumi does, so the two start talking about their favorite methods and theories, and Takumi is so impressed by her that he decides to give Reiva a little quiz. Takumi tears a piece of paper from one of his journals and asks her if she can figure out what this magic circle is for. Reiva looks at it and can tell that it's a recomposition circle used to make sweets, but there's something off about it and Reiva doesn't know what it is. Reiva starts panicking and crying because she can't answer Takumi's question. Reiva tells him she doesn't know the answer because this isn't the same candy spell Reiva knows, and she was fully expecting Takumi to reject her for failing his test, but on the contrary, he extends his hand and invites her to join his party. Reiva was actually right about the circle being used to make candy, but it was slightly different because Takumi uses different ingredients in his candy. However, Takumi thinks it's amazing that Reiva can figure out the magic circle just by looking at it. So Takumi tells her he would love to have her on his team. Since Takumi has accepted Reiva, Palom creates the contract between them and Reiva is glad to be employed finally, but she asks him if he can do a small favor for her. Reiva wants him to help her return her wages to her home village. Reiva explains that her family is impoverished, so she wants to support them as much as possible so her brother can have a better life. If Reiva wants that, then Takumi sees no reason to refuse. Meanwhile, the king of Sidonia is getting ready to retaliate against the kingdom of Barkula for refusing to hand Takumi over, so the king plans to send out the Holy Knights to make an example of them, but Elizabeth has a better idea. They will soon be summoning their heroes, so Elizabeth plans to start rumors to build hatred for the people of Barkula alongside Neon. Once they have summoned their heroes, they will find an excuse to wage war and get their revenge. A little while later, Takumi finishes synthesizing the adamantite framework for the carriage, and Reiva is amazed that he could create something like this on his own. Reiva offers to begin polishing the frame, but as she does so, her mood plummets because Reiva doesn't think she could achieve something like this. But Takumi assures her that while the alchemy circles he used may look complicated, it isn't that much harder than the candy spell. Takumi is sure that after a little training Reiva will be able to perform alchemy just as well as him because she has the most valuable trait for alchemy. Eventually, with Reiva's help, Takumi can finish the carriage. While Takumi admires his work, an old man walks up next to him to look at the carriage as well. He asks Takumi if this belongs to him, but Takumi responds that he made it, but Takumi is actually going to give this to the king. Just then the others come running over while yelling to get the king's attention. Since they definitely aren't referring to Takumi, Takumi realizes that the man standing next to him must be the king, and he is shocked by how casually he spoke with him earlier. The king tells him he doesn't have to worry about formalities since this is an informal meeting, and the reason King chose to have this informal meeting is because he thinks formal meetings are boring. King also wanted to meet the famous alchemist as soon as possible, so he could thank him in person, but Takumi was surprised to hear that the king wanted to thank him. Takumi is not sure what he could have done to get thanks from the king, but the king reminds him that he invented the toilets, which solved the kingdom's sewage problem. So as the king, he has to show his gratitude. Normally a grand banquet would be held in Takumi's honor, and all sorts of rewards and titles would be given to him, but that would draw too much unwanted attention. The king knows Takumi wants to remain anonymous to avoid being targeted by Sidonia. The king seems really good, and Takumi is grateful that the king is so understanding. The king ended up rewarding Takumi for his toilet invention, and afterwards, the group began their journey home. As they leave, the king watches from his window and instructs his attendants to ensure no one ever knows that Takumi came here today. Simon agrees to tell everyone in the castle to keep their mouths shut about Takumi. However, once they start exporting Takumi's goods outside Barkula, Takumi's influence will spread so far that it will be impossible to stop Sidonia from acting against him. After returning to Bolton, Takumi sits down with all his slaves to discuss their wages, but to his shock, Maria and Sophia say they don't want to get paid. Maria says Takumi already gives her plenty of food, so she is happy with the allowance he already provides, and Sophia doesn't have much use for his salary, so she doesn't see a need to get paid. Reiva thinks it's weird that Takumi has to argue to convince these two to accept their salary, but she is enjoying the show now. Takumi tries to explain to Sophia that even if she doesn't need the money right now, it's still a good idea to save it for the future, but Sophia has made up his mind. Sophia is an elf, so she is guaranteed to live more than Takumi. Even after Takumi dies, Sophia intends to spend the rest of her life watching over his grave. Maria isn't going to live as long, but she would gladly do the same. The sentiment is nice, but Takumi wishes these two could devise a plan that doesn't involve sitting by his grave for eternity. Meanwhile, over in the Empire of Sidonia, one of Elizabeth's spies has managed to get their hands on one of Takumi's purification devices, and she is disgusted that someone would dare to replicate holy magic instead of paying them. Elizabeth refuses to let this stand, and she knows that these purification devices originated from the city of Bolton, so Elizabeth intends to send a small unit to destroy whoever is producing the devices. Takumi and Reiva are in his workshop at Takumi's house when Reiva suddenly asks him if she can register at the Adventurers Guild. Takumi is surprised by her request, but Reiva says she wants to help Takumi as an adventurer, just like Maria and Sophia. Also, being an adventurer would help her improve her stats, and improving her stats will allow her to do more complex alchemy. When Reiva puts it like that, Takumi can see why she wants to become an adventurer, and he agrees to let her register. The two of them head to the guild, and Reiva gets a guild card issued to her so she can join Takumi's party. On the topic of Takumi's party, Hans tells him to hurry up and devise a name already. Except for Reiva. Everyone in Takumi's party is already D rank, and with their performance they are easily one of the guild's top parties, so they can't stay nameless forever. Takumi doesn't think it's that much of an issue if he leaves his party nameless, since Takumi never wanted to be an adventurer. In the first place, his team doesn't have someone to fight on the front lines. Takumi could probably do it if he had more training, but Takumi is not really interested in getting stronger. Just then Barak shows up out of nowhere and says he is willing to train Takumi until he is the best frontliner out here, and he conveniently chooses to ignore Takumi when Takumi says he isn't interested in any training. Barak proceeds to throw Takumi all across the training grounds while demanding that he think of a name for his party. But between the fear and constant pain, the only names Takumi can come up with are toilet related, so Barak keeps throwing him around until he can think of something better. Unfortunately, Takumi couldn't think of anything, so by the end of the day he was covered in bruises and bumps. Maria starts patching him up, so Takumi asks if she has an idea for a party name, but Maria is even worse at naming things than he is, so she will not be much help. Takumi asks Sophia if she can think of a good party name, but her mind is a little preoccupied by the anger building within her. Sophia can't believe Barak would dare to hurt her master in such a way, and she gets up to head over to the guild right now, because Sophia is ready to throw hands over this. However, Takumi stops her and says Barak was just training him, and as much as it hurt, Takumi's combat stats did go up quite a bit because of it, so there is no reason to be mad at Barak. 10 months have passed since Takumi got summoned, and the other heroes are currently busy with their training. Yamato's combat prowess has been steadily improving, so much so that he is now overpowering the knight in charge of training him. However, Akira sits on the sidelines and mocks Yamato because he thinks Yamato's aggressive fighting style would never work in real combat. Akane reminds Akira that his fighting style is just as aggressive as Yamato's, but Akira says he is the hero, so Akira is naturally a better swordsman. Then Akira asks if Akane wants to go somewhere else with him, but Akane ignores him and turns to head back to her room. Since they got here, Yamato and Akira seem to have changed for the worse, and she doesn't know why. Akane has been trying to figure out as much as possible about Sidonia and its goddess Anat to figure out what is going on, but so far all she has found is the doctrine of the Church of Divine Light. Their doctrine preaches absolute human supremacy and treats all demi-humans as slaves. Still, on the other hand, Akane learned a bit about the Church of Creation that worships Norn, treating all humans and demi-humans equally. However, Sidonia is dominated by the Church of Divine Light, and if they summon her and the others as heroes to bring world peace, Akane thinks about what the royal family here intends to have them do. Back to Takumi gives Reiva a ring and a staff since she wants to help with their adventuring. The ring will help her activate magic, and since Reiva told him she knows how to use a staff, Takumi made one out of Trant wood and some mithril alloy. Reiva is really thankful that Takumi made such wonderful weapons for her, but Maple is starting to get jealous because Takumi never makes weapons for her. However, Takumi made a weapon for her this time and had Reiva help him make it, so Maple is thankful to both of them. The next day, Takumi is training with Barak again, and he tries to come up with a name for his party so he can get out of training, but the best Takumi gets is Cat's Claw, which is similar to Lion's Fang. So Barak puts him in an abdominal stretch hold. Maria tries to help by suggesting a name, but it's so bad that Barak rejects it and tosses Takumi to the ground. Takumi is getting worried that Sophia might attack Barack if he keeps swinging him around like this, but after seeing the training for herself, Sophia realizes that Takumi is really weak in hand-to-hand combat, so she now thinks the training is necessary. After several hours of being thrown around, Takumi finally gets a break, but just as he is finally getting to relax, Hans asks him if Takumi would like to take on an escort mission. Takumi hesitates accepting escort missions since they are usually long, but Barack tells him that with his carriage and Camellia it would only take him 4 days to get there and back. Also, the request is coming from Papek's company, so Takumi would be doing Papek a favor if he accepts. Takumi asks if Lion's Fawn can do it instead since they usually handle Papek's escort quests. But unfortunately, Lion's Fawn is currently out on a separate mission, so they can't do it. Takumi still doesn't want to accept the quest, but everyone else thinks it'll be a good idea, so he is forced to accept. They begin their journey to the town of Kilbus, and the man they are escorting says he feels much more secure knowing that Takumi and his party will protect him. He plans to sell some basic necessities as well as purification devices, but while he is there, Papek also asks him to buy some milk. Takumi is shocked to learn that milk exists in this world since he has never seen any, but it just usually isn't sold in Bolton. Kilbus also has other dairy products like cheese, so Takumi is starting to get excited about this trip after all. Once they arrive at Kilbus, Takumi asks everyone to try cream stew for the first time. As they take their first bite, they all think it's really tasty and unique, since they've never tasted anything like it before, but Takumi thinks he could improve this recipe a little, so Takumi says they should buy a lot of cheese and milk before they return home. Luckily, the markets in this town stay open at night, so Takumi can buy as much as he wants right now. That night they all head out to buy the dairy products, and afterwards, they all sit down together to taste them. Having milk and cheese again makes Takumi think about his old life in Japan, but he doesn't miss it because his life in this world is much more fulfilling than it ever was on Earth. Sophia notices that Takumi is deep in thought, so she asks him if something happened, and he asks her if Sophia ever thinks about returning to her hometown. Sophia says she prefers her current life too much to continue dwelling on the past. Sophia spent 50 years of her life tracked by the curse that had been placed on her, but after forming a contract with Takumi, Sophia was able to live a new life, so all she cares about now is moving forward with Takumi and the others. Everyone else agrees with Sophia's sentiment, and Takumi understands how they feel since ever since coming to this world, it feels like he has been given wings to live his life as he pleases. Now that Takumi thinks about it, those metaphorical wings are all thanks to Norn, so he has finally decided on a name for his party, the Wings of Norn. After completing the escort mission, Takumi and the others return to Bolton. But upon arriving at his mansion, Takumi realizes something is wrong. The entire room is full of paralysis poison, and before Takumi even realizes what's going on, the girls have all been poisoned and captured by two masked men. One of them approaches Takumi and attempts to stab him to death, but at the last second, the knife gets knocked out of his hand by a web, so Takumi seizes the opportunity to counterattack and knocks the first guy out. The second guy then tries to attack Takumi, but he can easily flip him over and knock him out. Now that the threats have been neutralized, Takumi thanks Maple for the assist since she really saved him back there. Then Takumi uses Cure to get rid of the poison so the girls can move again, and Sophia apologizes for being unable to protect him. Takumi tells her it's not her fault she couldn't move since only he and Maple have paralysis resistance skills. Speaking of Maple, she asks Takumi what he wants to do with the rest of the intruders Maple found. Maple found these guys lurking around the house, so she defeated them and tied them up in her webs, but by the looks of it, this was a planned assassination attempt. Takumi sends Sophia to get Barack from the guild, and he has the assassins taken away after arriving. But Barack tells Takumi that he should probably report this to the Lord of Bolton, because it looks like Sidonia finally found him. Later, Takumi meets with the Lord, and his investigation reveals that the people who tried to attack him were the Divine Light Squadron members. They are basically a task force that Sidonia sends out to execute anyone whom they deem to be problematic for the Church of Divine Light. Takumi is horrified that Sidonia is really trying to kill him. Takumi is informed that Sidonia is after his head because of the purification devices he created. Previously, the kingdom had to rely on priests to use holy magic to purify the sewers. The priests of the Church of Creation and the Church of Divine Light used to take turns doing it, and while the Church of Creation did it for free, the Church of Divine Light always charged large fees. But now with Takumi's invention, priests aren't needed for purification anymore, so Takumi pretty much cost the Church of Divine Light a huge portion of their revenue. Takumi asks if he must go into hiding or leave the nation. Still, Takumi is told that he will be safest if he remains here in Bolton, since this nation has many followers of the Church of Creation, so it will be hard for the Church of Divine Light to exert its influence here. As an extra precaution, they will increase the number of patrols for the knights and city guard to prevent more divine light assassins from showing up. That takes care of the city security, but Barak says they still need to worry about Takumi's safety while he's out on adventuring missions. Takumi turns to him and says he actually intends to suspend his adventuring for now given the circumstances, but Barak refuses to accept that. Takumi's party is one of the top 5 in the guild, so it would be a loss for the guild if he stopped adventuring. The guild is way more important to Barak than Takumi's life being in danger. Sophia adds to this by saying she will protect Takumi even if it costs her life, so Sophia wants to keep adventuring with him. Takumi is too much of a pushover to refuse either of them, so he ends up agreeing to continue being an adventurer. As the 3 of them head back to the guild, Takumi takes a moment to think. It is clear that Sidonia is after his life, but because of him his friends were put in danger last night and he needs to do something that he is going to keep them safe. Once they get to the guild, Takumi and Sophia meet with Hans, and they can finally register their party name. But before they leave, Hans warns Takumi that he needs to be careful. Rumors about the attack on him have already begun to spread, and there are also rumors that a huge bounty has been placed on Takumi's head, so there is a chance that some of the adventurers here might try to attack him. Later that night, Takumi returns home and tells everyone the bad news. Maria is upset after hearing everything because it means there is a high chance that more people will attack them again. Takumi apologizes to all of them since they are in danger because of him, but they tell him there is no need to be sorry because they all chose to stick by his side no matter what. Besides, they are strong enough to handle anyone who tries to attack them again. Takumi is glad he has the girls to support him, but Takumi is still a little worried, so he has been thinking of creating a magical device to raise a barrier around his house. That way no attackers would ever be able to get close to him or the girls while they are at home. But Takumi still needs to worry about their safety while they are out on adventures, so Sophia suggests he should find someone to act as their party's tank. Takumi agrees, but has no idea where to start looking for one, so Sophia tells him that there are a lot of adventurers who are solo, so they could probably find someone in no time. But there is no guarantee that they'd be trustworthy, so Takumi intends to look for another slave instead. Everyone goes to bed for the night while the knights stand guard outside the mansion. But Takumi stays up all night working on his barrier device. The next morning, Takumi calls Reva outside to help him with the alchemy, but surprisingly Sophia comes over as well and says she wants to help. Takumi is happy to have an extra set of hands, so he agrees to let Sophia help and asks her to make this magic circle into one of the metal plates Takumi brought out. Once that is done, Takumi begins pouring some magic powder on the metal sheet, and while he does this, Sophia asks him if Takumi managed to get any sleep last night. Takumi admits that he stayed up all night because he was thinking about defensive measures for the future, and speaking of defensive measures, it looks like Maple is training with Camellia. They are practicing Camelia's smash attacks against some fake golems. But now that Reva thinks about it, golems fall under alchemy, so if Takumi were able to make one, it would be perfect to act as their party's tank. Unfortunately, golems require magic circles to be engraved into their control core, and that is still too complex for Takumi to do, so he can't try making one. Takumi would need his mana manipulation skill to level up a lot even to attempt it, but for now Takumi just wants to focus on finishing up the barrier, so he begins casting a spell to bind the spell to the metal plates, and once Takumi is done, all that's left is to place them on the house. Suddenly, Takumi gets a notification that his mana manipulation skill has been maxed out and evolved into spell control, so maybe he can attempt the golem creation after all. Meanwhile in Sidonia, the king has just been informed that the Divine Light Squadron was captured. The king is shocked to hear that not only did the Divine Squadron fail to kill their target, but they were also captured. By now the kingdom of Barkula must have interrogated the assassins and found out that Sidonia was behind it, so this matter has become a lot more troublesome than he had anticipated. Elizabeth suggests to the king that they should put a hold on any further attacks on Barkula for now and instead focus on completing their other mission regarding the summoning circle. The king thinks she is right, so he asks Homer for a progress report on the ruined magic circles they found. Homer replies by telling the king that he cannot analyze the circle completely, but it seems to be functional regardless, so they just need to wait for it to accumulate enough magic power to be activated. This means it should take about 2 months before they can finally summon their heroes. Back at Takumi's house, Takumi has just finished his first attempt at a golem, and it was a total failure. Creating multi-layered magic circles for the core is a lot harder than he thought it would be, so Takumi will probably have to level up even more before he can handle it. Maple asks him why Takumi even wants to make a golem in the first place because he already has all of them, and they are powerful, but Takumi thinks it would be nice to have a golem to guard the house at all times, even when they go on adventures together. If that is the case, Maple asks why Takumi doesn't just find a natural golem and tame it, and that is actually a brilliant idea. So Takumi immediately starts making plans to do exactly that. Takumi asks Sophia if there are any good locations to find golems, so she tells him that around the Forests of Death, there have been reports of occasional stone golems being sighted. If you go into the dungeon, there is a chance you might even find an iron golem inside. Takumi is surprised to learn that this world has dungeons, but Sophia is confused about how Takumi could possibly not know about the dungeons. Takumi makes up an excuse and says he hasn't been inside a dungeon before, but Takumi thinks they should try heading into the dungeon to find an iron golem. But Sophia tells him that would be a bad idea because it would be reckless to try to take on the dungeon when they don't have a tank in their team yet. Sophia makes a good point, so Takumi and the others head to the rock areas searching for a rock golem. Eventually they manage to spot one, but it's way bigger than they thought it would be. Sophia informs everyone that the golem they are faced with is probably a guardian class, and to kill it, they would need to target its magic stone. But Takumi doesn't want to kill it. Just then the golem turns in their direction and starts scanning the area, so Sophia and Takumi duck behind a rock to hide from it. Sophia didn't expect the golem to have a scan ability, and she is starting to worry that it may be too much for them to handle, so Sophia suggests that they should look for a different golem to tame. However, Takumi still thinks this is the best golem, since having a dangerous golem like that guarding his house would scare most attackers. Takumi doesn't waste another minute and immediately runs out to challenge the golem, but just as everyone gets into position and is about to fire, Takumi suddenly realizes that the golem isn't attacking him, so Takumi tells everyone to wait while he tests something out. Takumi is terrified to be so close to the golem, but for some reason he feels energy similar to that of Norn's coming off it, so Takumi assumes it must have been created to guard some of Norn's ancient ruins. If that is the case, then Takumi thinks the blessing Norn gave him should be enough to make it friendly. Takumi stretches out his arm and attempts to tame the golem, and it actually works out. Takumi has successfully tamed the golem, and he did it without having to fight at all, so the girls are really impressed. Maple asks Takumi what he plans to name the golem now that Takumi has tamed it, so Takumi thinks about it for a second and eventually comes up with the name Titan. Everyone greets Titan and welcomes him to their team, and it seems like Titan is trying to tell them something, but his body isn't very versatile, so Takumi intends to make him a new one. Takumi tells everyone that they can head home now, but Sophia points out that they will cause a huge commotion if they return with a giant golem. Takumi realizes that might be an issue, so he is about to put Titan in his pocket dimension, but before Takumi could do so, Titan begins to crumble and shrinks himself down to a little rock golem. Now they can take him with them to town without causing a huge scene, and Takumi promises to get to work on some improvements for Titan as soon as possible. Meanwhile, in the future, Akane continues to watch as her friends become more powerful and scummy with each passing day. The two of them are now strong enough to take out the entire knight squad of the castle, and they are taking great joy in calling all the knights weak as they stand over them. As soon as Takumi got home, he got right to work designing a new body for Titan, and Takumi was excited about it. Takumi plans to begin construction soon, but before that he needs to take care of something. Takumi calls a meeting with everyone and tells them he plans to dissolve all his contracts with them. The girls are shocked to hear this and ask Takumi why, so he explains that they will always be in danger if they stick around him, and Takumi doesn't want to let them get hurt. Takumi has considered this ever since the day they first got attacked, and he is sure that this is for the best. The girls ask who will protect him if they aren't around, but Takumi says he still has Titan with him, as well as Maple and Camellia, so they don't have to worry about him. Takumi wants the three of them to live somewhere safe, and of course he will pay them a lump sum so they can afford to live comfortably for a while. Takumi tells them to think of it as his final gift to them, but suddenly, Maria gets up from her seat and points her spear at him. Maria can't accept Takumi's decision and asks why he prioritizes others. Takumi tells her he doesn't want to be the reason any of them get hurt, so as much as Takumi loves them, he can't have them stay with him any longer. Maria yells that if Takumi truly cares about them, then he should want them to fight by his side and overcome whatever challenge comes their way together. But Takumi remains silent because he doesn't know what to say. Maria breaks down in tears and apologizes for threatening Takumi, but she doesn't know what to do with herself if she is not by Takumi's side. Sophia comforts Maria and tells Takumi that while she understands that he is only asking them to leave out of concern for their safety, telling them to abandon him after everything they've been through is simply too cruel. They all swore to serve Takumi with everything they've got, and were serious about remaining loyal to him forever. Takumi finally gets it, so he apologizes to everyone for trying to push his decision on them without considering how they feel. Takumi asks them one last time if they really want to stay by his side despite all the dangers they may face, and the girls tell him they'll be by his side, no matter what comes their way. Now that they've sorted that out, Takumi resumes work on Titan's body, and he is super shiny now. Titan absolutely loves his new body, and why wouldn't he? It has an adamantite skeleton with mythical armor, as well as every weapon Takumi could fit in there. Best of all, Takumi made a giant body for the little Titan to go in. So Takumi has finally achieved a lifelong dream of creating a real Gundam, and he couldn't be happier. Meanwhile, Norn is watching Takumi from heaven, probably jealous of his giant mech, but she is suddenly approached by one of her subordinates, and she has bad news. There are signs that a knot is starting to come into existence. The god that the Church of Divine Light worships didn't exist before, but after years of worship their collective will has given birth to a knot. Unfortunately, a knot is on the verge of becoming an evil spirit because their will is so rotten. On top of that, since Sidonia was the country responsible for summoning the heroes, they may start a war once those heroes are strong enough. Norn was already aware of this, but she couldn't directly interfere with the moral realm. That is why Norn placed Takumi in this world and granted him many blessings. From then on, the fate of this world rests on Takumi's shoulders. So now what will happen next? Subscribe to our channel to find out what will happen next. Friends, before we wrap up, we've recently launched a membership program, where you can enjoy perks like early access to videos and exclusive content just for members and many more to enhance your interactions. If you're interested, consider joining our membership. To enjoy these benefits, check out the link in the description to join. So friends, if you enjoyed our recap video, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.